that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sonny Fishback. Sonny is a grad of the program who is also mentored for us, and he's going to talk to us tonight about building web applications with SvelteKit. Thanks so much, Sonny.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, my name's Sonny, Code Louisville, Code U alum, and currently I am a senior full stack dev at Ashley Furniture. Um, Today we're going to be talking about SvelteKit, and this is a follow-up on the talk about Svelte 2 weeks ago. So if you come from a React or Vue background, SvelteKit is like Next.js or Nuxt. I don't know how many people are familiar with those, but SvelteKit is a application framework. So you have Svelte, which is for building user interfaces. And then SvelteKit pretty much is like a toolkit you build around your Svelte applications to build real world production ready web applications. And it solves a lot of the problems that you would run into when building web applications with Svelte. So I'm going to share this link in the chat. This is the best resource for anyone that's interested in SvelteKit. Just go to svelte.dev. They have a blog, so you can keep up to date with any of the latest changes in the project. They have an interactive playground here for you to do any experimenting that you want to do. And then they have a hands-on tutorial, which we will be using for this SvelteKit tutorial. And then they also have awesome docs that get in great detail from the core concepts to advanced concepts. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the tutorial. So we walked through the basics of Svelte, and now we're going to cover the basics of SvelteKit. So SvelteKit solves problems for you. Some of the biggest ones they solve are routing, server-side rendering, data fetching, pre-rendering, and production build optimization. So I'm not going to just list all of these off, but I will talk about the ones that I just shouted out. So for routing, that pretty much answers the question of if my application gets a request for this URL, what do I respond with? So if I want to go to /about, I'll respond with the content for the /about page. Server-side rendering is the strategy of rendering your HTML and your markup on the server and returning that directly to the browser, as opposed to client-side rendering, which you may have experience with if you're coming from a React or Vue.js background, where you make a request for a page, the server responds with a very lightweight HTML file that includes a bundle of JavaScript code. And once the browser receives that response, it then runs that JavaScript bundle. So there's some timing issues there, none that we would catch with our eyes. But when you have things like web scrapers for Google that are parsing the entire internet for SEO purposes, it's important to be able to get that content directly to your user as fast as possible. And that's where server-side rendering really shines. Data fetching. So if you need to fetch any data, let's say you have a web page that needs to make an external call to a database. SvelteKit can handle that for you by loading data. Pre-rendering. Let's say, for example, in the past, I had a very small project. Someone wanted a website made, and they didn't really want to spend a lot of money hosting. So what I was able to do is leverage the free tier of a web service and fetch all of the data just once during pre-rendering. So then I didn't have to make those API calls for each request to that page, because you're able to pre-render that content and then store it as a static file. And then production build optimizations. This one's really cool. Pretty much, let's say you have a bunch of code and some of it will not be used ever. There's no like path to that code being executed. SvelteKit will just strip that code out. And since it's less code being deployed, it means it's less code that needs to run. If it's less code that needs to run, It's usually faster. So those are some cool features that SvelteKit handles for you. Also deploying to different hosting providers. That's a super cool one we probably won't get too deep into. So anyone wants to follow along, you can go ahead and pull up SvelteKit tutorial and follow along. It's pretty easy to follow along. If you get stuck, just post in the chat. So SvelteKit apps are server rendered by default, just like traditional multi-page apps or MPAs. So this gives us really good first page load performance, but SvelteKit allows us to then transition to client-side navigation, like modern single-page applications or SPAs, to avoid having to reload everything for each navigation. So you make a request to the page, it renders on the server, but after that, as you navigate, it's client-side navigation. So you get the benefits of the really fast and snappy client-side navigation benefits, while also getting all the benefits of server-side rendering as well. It's good for SEO and page speed. So project structure, we'll talk a little bit about the project structure of what you'll see often in a SvelteKit project. This is much lighter than what you usually see when you create your initial SvelteKit application, but you have the source folder. This is where your source code goes into. The routes folder, this is where you specify your routing. You have app.html, which is the structure of your SvelteKit responses. When you request a page, this is how you shape the response. And what happens is this SvelteKit head is replaced by all of your head content, and then the body is replaced with all of your body content as you switch through page by page. We'll see this in detail a little bit later. You also have your package JSON, which has all your dependencies in it and some scripts used to interact with the CLI. So you can see here we have SvelteKit as a dependency and Svelte, because we'll be using those, of course. We have our Svelte config, which is how you configure your SvelteKit application. Especially when you're first starting, you rarely will need to configure anything. But if we have time, we'll definitely talk about some config options. And then you have your Vite config. SvelteKit uses Vite under the hood, and Vite is a development server and build tool. And we are able to get all of the features of Vite because SvelteKit uses Vite under the hood. So one of the biggest things that you'll see that's coming from the Vite project is, as we make changes, you'll immediately see those reflected here through hot module replacement. Any module that changes, Vite will update it for us. We won't have to refresh the page. All right, so then you also have the static folder here, and this is where you'd have like static content. So you could put like your favicon here, your robot.txt file, which is a file that explains like web scrapers, like what you can do on my site and stuff like that. Maybe you have some images in here or some fonts. And that's the project structure. All right, so SvelteKit uses file system based routing, which means that, in other words, what your app should do when a user navigates a particular URL is defined by the directories in your code base. So each page.svelte represents a file, and then I'll call out that these page.svelte, everything.svelte is a Svelte component. So these look a little bit weird. You get the plus that page, but these are components. So in your routes folder, every page.svelte that you create represents a page. So right now we have, if I refresh this, we have our root page, and we have our root page.svelte here. Now, the instructions here are telling us to go to /about. So if we click on this link, go to /about, we get 404 not found. And that's because we don't have a page defined in /about. So does anyone have an idea what I would have to do to create a page for /about?
Yeah, you just make, would you make another subfolder inside routes that's about?
Oh
And
yeah.
have a page.svelte there too?
Oh yeah. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Let's get some clapping hands in the chat for Lisa. Awesome. I wasn't expecting anyone to have an answer yet. You got a page.svelte there. So I got a page.svelte there, and now there's no content, but at least we're not getting that 404. So what I'll do is I'll copy this out. I'll copy this content. Then we got that hot module replacement thanks to Veet. We saw that update super quick there. We didn't have to refresh the page. All right, so you first, you would server render this page. You got to go to the server, ask for the contents of /about. But from there, you've already, this content is on your browser now. So now when we switch between home and about, it's actually being client side rendered. So we got all the benefits of server side rendered. We get that initial page load that was super fast. But now when we want to switch between pages, we don't want to have to go to the server and re-request everything. There's a lot of stuff, especially on like production web applications. So you get to actually only update what needs to get updated. And unlike React or Vue, where your pages or your components or subcomponents are re-rendered when the values change, Svelte only tracks values and updates those values. So super lightweight, and this makes it very easy to keep your applications fast as they grow. All right, any questions so far about page.svelte or routing in SvelteKit? Take that is not right now. All right, so let's move to layouts. So different routes of your application will often share common UI. So you usually have like a global header or a global like footer at the bottom. And you can use layout.svelte to reuse that content instead of redeclaring it in each one of your pages. So these layouts are specific to the route in the child routes. So if I were to create a layout in about here, it wouldn't affect this page.svelte that's outside of this route. But if I create a global layout.svelte in this route, then it would affect all of the routes. And then you can break out of the routes if you have some sub route that you don't want to have that layout. We may cover that later. So the tutorial is telling us to create a root layout.svelte. So let's go ahead and do that. Come on. All right. So plus layout.svelte. And then see we get no content here. Everything disappeared. So what I'll do is I'll copy this nav and I'll paste that here. Now we see that. Awesome. Now, I called out earlier that all of these .svelte files are just components. So we can treat them like pages because they are, but they're also components. And what SvelteKit does behind the scenes is it takes your layout and then all of your page content, it passes it in inside of the layout or the page. So it'll be a prop. So what that means is for us to render out in our layout, for us to render out the rest of the content, then we'll need to be able to reference that prop, those props. So script, now we need to write some JavaScript. So we'll open up a script tag. And for those who haven't kept up with Svelte or the last tutorial, you can write your script for your JavaScript, your markup for your markup, and your style all in Svelte components. And since this page is a Svelte component, you can do all three. So we're going to say we'll do it like this. We'll say props. These are all the props that are passed in. And then we have this special thing called runes, which is a part of the Svelte syntax. It's like a reserved keyword or a language that it may be confusing if you didn't participate in the Svelte.js tutorial. That's all right. So now what we need is we need to be able to render out props.children. And we'll actually destructure this. This is best practice, is what's recommended. So we'll just delete that. And now we can see that we have some duplicate content as we navigate through our web app. So we'll go ahead and we'll delete these. All right, so I deleted it for this page, for the home page. And now when I go to about, I still see that duplicate. So how do I fix that? So in the page, I don't have the nav. In the layout, I have the nav. And then in about, looks like I have some duplicate. So how do I resolve that? Got these two navs as duplicate. Not home, just about. It's the home route. This is the about route.
It's because the nav is also defined in there, so you can just delete that.
Oh yeah, just delete that. That easy. Just delete that. All right. If I were giving out points, Lisa, you have a bunch of points, but I'm not giving out any points. All right. Sweet. So we rendered out the children. So now we are able to reuse some UI. And that's a layout. So the next thing we're going to cover is route parameters. So to create routes with dynamic parameters, you'll use square brackets around a valid variable name. For example, a file like blog / angle bracket slug closing angle bracket, we will create a route that matches blog 1, blog 2, blog 3, and so on. So let's create that. So what this means, for example, I think I could probably go like SvelteKit. This is built with SvelteKit. That's why I always go to Ashley Furniture, and I also work here. And if I go to like sofas, we see search results, query params, but then it's not gonna work unless I sorry. We don't have this turned on in product. What's going on? There we go. All right, so now if I do this, lighting, I click on a light. For example, I have /p, which is the route, but then I have this product. But every page, there's 500,000 products. I'm not gonna have 500,000 routes, right? That doesn't make sense. So we can make it dynamic. So what this is here, if we were looking at the folder, it would be something like product ID or something. Does that make sense? Are we following? Cool. All right. So now let's create our dynamic blog. So we got /blog. I don't think we have /blog in here. We don't. So now we got to create that route. Blog. And then what's next? What we got to create next in here to make it a page? Layout. Page. Page.svelte. Awesome. So got that, but actually we missed our mark because we need another folder in here named slug. And this could be any, we could call it anything, but I'm going to name it slug. It's just, it makes sense. Slug, and then we'll put in here, we need another page. Need a page.svelte. All right, so we created that file, page.svelte, and then we need some content in here. So it's saying blog post, and then if we go to blog post 1, let's see what happens. So no content yet. So now inside of this slug, we'll just say so now I could do blog 1, or I could do blog 5, right? Or whatever I want to make it, right? And it's going to route to that page. But now we want to take that parameter, right? We went to ashleyfurniture.com. We put in a product ID. So what's happening is on the route, we're loading some data. We're grabbing that product ID, and then we're saying, hey, give me the data for this product ID. I'm going to render it in this page. We're not creating a different page for each product. So that's the data fetching and the loading part that we mentioned. So let's move on to loading. So at its core, SvelteKit's job boils down to 3 things: routing, figure out which route matches an incoming request; loading, get the data needed by the route; and rendering, generate some HTML either on the server or update the DOM during client-side rendering, depending on if you've requested that page before or not, or if you've configured it differently. We've seen how routing and rendering work. So let's talk about the middle part, loading. Every page of your app, each page.svelte, can declare a load function in a page.server.js or TS, whatever you're writing, TypeScript, JavaScript, whatever, that runs alongside the page.svelte. As the name suggests, this module only ever runs on the server, including for client-side navigations. So let's add blog/page.server so we can load some data. So we get blog, and then in blog, we're going to do page.server.js. And then we need to export a function. And SvelteKit knows, hey, if they have this page.server for this request, and this file, this module is exporting a function named load, then I need to run this on the server every time this route is executed. So we'll do that. We'll export a function named load. And in here, we'll need to return some data. And I'm not spelling that right. Return some data. All right. And what it's telling us is that it had some hard-coded data waiting on it. So we'll use that data. So we'll say get posts from data.js. And yep, I see data.js right there. Cool. Let's see what's in here. So you got some posts in here, and that's it. Okay, cool. And some posts. And now it wants us to return summaries. And that's just going to be a new array that we're creating using map, where we iterate over each one of these posts. And then we return slug and title, which is, and there's a typo, post nut. And then I could do it that way, how they suggested, but I'm just going to return this because looks better to me. All right. So now what we've done is we've mapped over the post, and then we've created a new object. And what ends up happening is summaries ends up evaluated into a new array of objects that only have the title and the slug. All right. So what happens is this page server, you get a request, you hit this server, this loads this data, returns it, and then inside of your page, because it's a component, SvelteKit passes it in as a property, and the property's name is data. So now we need to get that data out. It's passed into this component /page/component script, and then I'll say let data equal rune props. All right. So we get that. And now, instead of hard coding these, we'll dynamically render these using Svelte, each block. So let's delete these. And we're going to say, let's look at the syntax, because I feel like there may be some people here who weren't on that tutorial. So let's go to Svelte. This is easy to navigate. Just go to Svelte, right? Because we're doing SvelteKit, but we're going to go back to Svelte, and then we go back to template syntax each. Each iterating over values can be done within each block. So then you just go each, it's like a list, right? You go each items as item, and then you can pass that there. Yep, so that's definitely what I want to do. So I'll do each, and then we'll say data dot summaries as summary, and then we want to end this block with a backslash, and then we need to put some content in here. So let's see, we want it to be, what are they suggesting? A list item, right? And then they want an anchor tag, and then this anchor tag must have, and that's, I don't need to do summary. I can destructure this as well. And then I could say title. Is that working? It's not working. Slash blog. Okay, there we go. I had to refresh it. And then we got an href here. So we want our hyper reference link, whatever it's called. And we want that to be slash blog. And then we can write JavaScript expressions inline. And so we'll do slug. All right. Does anyone have any questions so far? Sweet. So we're rendering out each one of these, right? It reads really well. Each of the summaries, I want to get the slug in the title, destructure that, and then I'm just going to pass it in, right? And so for each one of these, it's going to render out this markup. And now we want to click on these to see if it works. So click on that. All right, it takes us to blog post. So if we go in here, we're not fetching that data, right? So we're not taking the slug that's being passed in and like loading that on the server, passing that data in. So what do we need to do in this slug route? We have a layout.svelte, we have a page.svelte, but we need to do some server stuff. So what we need, what type of function do we need? We need a load function. Cool. So we put our load functions in server file. So we're going to do page server.js. And then we need to export a function. So I'm going to just follow this here. It wants us to import posts from data.js. And then it wants us to export a function. Load. And then it wants us to return some data. And it's telling us to destructure params off of this, whatever parameter is being provided there, but I want to figure out what's actually available there. So I'm not just going to copy and paste what they're saying. Let's go in here. Let's go to SvelteKit docs. Let's go to loading data, page data, loading data. Give me some answers. Page load. All right. Page load. All right. So it's telling me right here. So it says page load is type page load, which has an event. And then I'm just going to event. Where's events? Request handler, load. Here it is, load reference. And then this is like TypeScripty, so please forgive me, but load, where is this? Load event. All right, so the load event. All right. It's not telling me what I want to hear. Where are we going to find this at? Looking for the wrong type. Request event. Is it request event? Yeah, here it is. All right. Okay. Request event. I was hallucinating. So it wants us to get params. So then we should see params somewhere. Here it is. All right. So this is what we get. Each time you have a load function, it's a request event. So you get that request that's causing that load function to render and subsequently render the page, right? That stems all from an initial request to like my website / about. You have this data here. So you're able to access the cookies, fetch, and then some other stuff. But we see that params is coming from that object. So we'll just destructure params now. And then it wants us to return a post. So we need to get that post. And all this data is hard-coded, but imagine this being a database that you're fetching from. Some database some other team maintains. You got to get some data from it, or it's an API you built, whatever. So we're going to say const post equals posts dot find. And then we got to pass in a callback. So we're going to get each post. We're going to iterate over it. We're going to find the post that evaluates to this, makes this a true statement. So I'm going to say post.slug equals params.slug. And remember, this is called, like we could change this to name or whatever, and then it would be params.name. So don't let slug confuse you. You'll usually probably like use slug a lot of times because it just makes sense, is what it actually is, but it's just a variable name. It's just a variable name. So, all right, so now we got that data, and now we need to return it. So we got the post. Let's return that data, refresh the page. Uh-oh. We don't see it. Why don't we see it? We got to pass it in. We have to reference it. We got to pass it in. So here we got just blog posts. First thing, like it's a component, right? So we got a script. Then we got to get the props. And it's the data. I'm going to go ahead and destructure it because we already did it before. We know it's data. It's coming back. And we'll call it props. And then with the time we have left over, I'll be able to cover like what this is for anyone that has questions, because I know this is probably confusing. All right, so we got that. And then we have, give us H2. And this is going to be data.post.title. Oh yeah, that works. Beautiful. Div, we got a div here. And then in this div, we're going to do HTML, data.post.content. So I do want to call out, usually you don't want to use @HTML. So what happens is, let's remove this for a second. What happens is SvelteKit keeps you safe, and in Svelte keeps you safe. And if you provide like some type of text, it's escaped. So it's stringified. So even though this is with clearly some markup, it's a p tag, SvelteKit takes it as a string to protect you from cross-site request forgery, or cross-site scripting. How do you say this? Cross-site scripting. All right, there we go. Cross-site scripting attacks is where someone is able to inject markup into your application and execute it as if it's a part of your project. So what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, Svelte, thank you, buddy, but we know, we trust where this is coming from. We want it to render out as HTML, and just trust us, right? But you wouldn't usually do this, but sometimes you will. Like if you have an API that's returning a bunch of markup for your dynamic blogs, then that's a time where you use @HTML. But usually you do not want to, especially if it's from some like third-party company that is not great. So, all right, we got that rendering out. So now let's go back to blog. We see all of our blogs. So now we can see all these blogs, right, dynamically. It's the same route, same path, but we're handling the parameter, the slug, dynamically, and we're fetching that data dynamically and passing that down. So it does say here, right, if we go to like blog/nope, that it just crashes our server 500, right? So we probably want to do some like handling server side. So we're going to say, we're going to import this util that SvelteKit exposes. So if we go import error from Svelte.js/kit, I think, yep. And then, not that, we'll do if what? If there's no post, how do we do that? If bang, no post, then we'll just do error, and we'll say 404 is going to be the error. So let's see what happens. Oh yeah, and then be like, we want to tell the user something, so we'll say message page not found. All right, there we go. So we got a message now. Error, it's a specific type. So like advanced error, we can go to reference. It takes a status and then it takes a body, but you only can pass in a message, which is a string. So it's a specific thing that it's asking for. Anytime you have questions, you can go to like the types reference. It's helpful. Cool. So we got that 404 working, and now let's look at, we looked at layout.svelte. Now let's look at layout data for loading data for our layouts. So just as you have the layout.svelte file that creates UI for every child route, you have the layout.server.js file that creates data for every child route, with loads of data. So you don't have to like keep reloading things that aren't necessarily needed to be reloaded. Suppose we like to add a more posts sidebar to our blog post page. We could return summaries from the load function in source/blog/slug, right? We could just return the data too, but that means for every different blog that we have, we now have to rerun that JavaScript to call that API or call that database or call that static file that we have hard coded. We have to rerun that. That's not necessary. What we can do is we can create a layout server that reruns that data, and we can pass it down and make it available to all of the child routes. So let's do that. And instead of page.server in blog, we'll just change it to layout server. So in blog, we got page.server, and we'll just change it to layout. And that just tells SvelteKit, hey, rerun this every time. So we're still able to go to blog. Everything works the same way, except SvelteKit knows behind the scenes, this is going to run not only for this route, but every route under it. So for this slug, or if we create another route or nested route inside of that, or 3 levels deep nested, this layout will run every time. So now in layout.svelte, in blog, what? Here it is. All right, yeah, they created it for me. We didn't create this. We want to put in a side here. So we already got the data. Awesome, they did everything for us. So we got a side tag, and then in here we got a h2, which says more posts, and then we got a ul here on under the list, and then inside of that we do each. Speed things along, we do that, and then we got data dot summaries, and then we'll destructure again. We'll do slug title, and then inside of here we'll have our list item, which will have an anchor tag because we want to be able to click on these, and then it'll say title in there, and then inside of this we want to add that Can't spell. There we go. All right. So now refresh the page. Wait a minute. Blog. Okay, it's inside of for the dynamic blogs because we're in the slug. Okay, makes sense. So now we can see that this data is available. This data here is available for each blog. It is running on the layout server, and it's not going to run again. So since the data is the same, it's not going to run again. It's just a way to separate things that you will need for every route and things that are only needed for a specific route. Just optimization there, which I think is pretty cool. All right, now we're going to move on to setting headers. Who knows what headers are? Like request and response headers. Is anyone?
They're part of the HTTP request that they have like metadata about like where the request is going, where it's coming from.
Oh yeah.
So on.
Precisely. Yeah, so we can't just talk about stuff without everyone being like kind of baseline on the same thing. Thank you, Lisa. So headers are an interface of the Fetch API and allows you to perform various actions on an HTTP request and response headers. These actions include retrieving, setting, adding to, or removing headers. So for example, let's see if we got some examples here. Right, so you can say like, hey, I'm making this request, right? And I want you to return it to me in text instead of whatever you're going to do. You can request that by adding a header. Or you could say like, all right, I'm requesting this thing and here's my authentication credentials. Here's my username password. I would pass that into the header of the request. Of course, it would be like encoded, but those are headers. So usually you would use these for things like okay, I don't see anything here, but cache control. So you can say like, I'm returning this thing. I want to cache it for 30 seconds, or I don't want to cache it at all, right? Like, let's say it's like the login page for your web application. You don't want that to be cached anywhere. Each user, they get their own login page. It's not going to be cached to be used by someone else. So you wouldn't cache that. So SvelteKit provides an interface to allow you to set headers. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So see, let's open this up a little bit, close this one, and then in routes, we need to create a global page server JS. And inside of this function, what type of function do we need to export? A load function. So in this load function, it gets that event, right? We talked about that event that we get. It's up here somewhere. So just stay on it. Action result. After navigate, before navigate, builder. What? Request, where is it? Request event. All right. So in request event, get request. I don't see it there. I promise it's there. You get this set headers method. Set headers. And now we can pass in an object of headers. So the first one we'll do is content type. And we're going to say text plain. And now let's request the page. All right, so returned it to us as plain text because we were able to set this header to modify the response, the request. So usually for headers, you would mostly use this for like I said, cache control. I think that's MDN doc. Yep, cache control, cache directives follow these rules. So this is cache control header holds directives or instructions in both requests and responses that control caching in browsers and shared cache like proxies or CDNs. So it's just how you can inform the server certain things like configuration options for caching or content type or some authentication, stuff like that. I think I covered everything here. And now we got reading and writing cookies. So you're able to request, you're able to get headers, and I could have showed something cool there. All right, so you got set headers, but you're also able to interface with cookies. So really quick, let's talk about cookies. I think I can do that really quick. We have time. Yeah. So cookies, when your web application, your cookies are what you return from the server, and they're like breadcrumbs, cookies that you can store on the client. So the next time they request anything from you, they will return those cookies. So cookies, sometimes they're awesome, sometimes they're a pain in the ass. So if we go to application and we go to, this is, where you look at all the data, and we do cookies, and I look at the cookies for ashleyfurniture.com, and you'll have all these cookies, a bunch of cookies. Sometimes you have like a third-party tag on your site. They'll set cookies and all types of stuff. But now, what I'll say is, let's look at the network tab. I'm gonna clear this out, and I'm gonna go sofa or red sofas, matter of fact. Red sofas. And now I'm looking for, I want to go search results. What was that? Fetch? I don't know which one it was. I'm looking for search results. We got so much noise going on. Well, even like every request, it sends the cookies. So if you look at the cookies somewhere here, response centers, request, server, cookie. So it's one cookie, in fact. It's not a bunch of cookies. So if you copy this cookie, this is all of your cookies. It's just one object. So if you go here and I say const cookie equals, and then I'll put it in a string. We don't paste code in it. I know I don't need a one. It won't let me paste in. Let me paste it. Okay, it won't let me paste it in there. It's in, unless I trust it. I understand it. But pretty much if you, how am I? It's like, I promise, it's like a really big, if you look at this, it's like this big thing, this big text object, and every cookie is split by this here. So if we do like, nothing's working here. That's all right. Well, there's this huge object, and what you have to do is you have to get the cookie, this huge text glob that's sent with every request, and then you have to split it by the semicolon. Then that's each of your individual cookies. And it's like a pain in the butt. And SvelteKit also provides a way to where you're able to interface with it very easy. So we'll do cookies, and then we want to be able to track you if you visited here before, right? So we'll say cookies.set, and it provides this really convenient method of doing this. And we can say visited equals true, and then we'll specify the path. So we'll say, hey, this cookie is sent with every request, like for every path, not just a specific path, but this is a root path. So all of the stuff, right? Let's refresh the page. We're still getting hello stranger. We also have to check this cookie. So we set it, and I think we could like check. I think we could check our cookies. We go to like application again, cookies. In a minute. Say I don't have any cookies. Okay. I'm getting sidetracked here. So we need to get the cookie. So we'll do cookies.get. visited. And now if we refresh the page, hello friend, right? Because we set the cookie, and then the next time we request the page, we get it, and we say, all right, did you visit it? Did you visit the page? It means like if you have the cookie that we left last time, that means you were here before, or you wouldn't have the cookie. So just trying to show like there's a really like complicated thing that the SvelteKit is like solving for us there. There's a package called cookies that everyone uses, and that's what SvelteKit uses under the hood. But it provides these interfaces to make things really, really nice and work well in production. So we solved this one. It tells you these are the defaults that it sets if you don't pass them in this configuration option. HTTP only, secure, same site. Those are configuration options I'll challenge you all to look at later. All right, so the lib alias. So we covered a few folders and files when we talked about the structure of your project. One thing that's really cool about Vite, and since SvelteKit uses Vite, really cool about SvelteKit is you're able to alias folders to kind of avoid these like super long relative links. So it says, because SvelteKit uses directory-based routing, it's easy to place modules and components alongside the routes that use them. For example, if I had like this module that's only used for blogs, and we had the blogs folder still, I might put that module inside of /blogs. But maybe I have to import it in another folder that's 3 levels deep. It gets crazy. So one thing they did is they leverage Vite aliases. So sometimes code is used in multiple places. When this happens, it's useful to have a place to put them that can be accessed by all routes. So SvelteKit does the source lib directory to do that. So you do source and create a folder named lib. It's my grandma's nickname. And you have like an index in here. Index.js. I think that's what they're asking me to do. Oh no, they want me to have message.js. And then inside of message.js, what do they want me to? The message.js, they want me to put something in here. Deeply nested route. So I'm just going to do export const message equals hello world, of course, right? And then we'll save that. And then inside of where they want us to do it, nested route, they want us to create another nested route, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to import it from here. And what I'm able to do is say import message from lib message.js. And then I'll have to take this, see if it works. There we go. Hello world. Yeah, that makes sense. So you can imagine, like, just imagine that we're like 100 levels deep in a folder, and then we got a backslash back, right? You can just avoid all that by just doing #lib. And that's just a cool feature of SvelteKit. I'm not going to harp too much on it. Moving on to the form element. So what I'll say is, as a front-end developer, most of what you're doing is submitting forms, building forms. So, for example, we just saw the search bar, right, where we search for red sofas. And if we were to click this, we'd be searching the database again. That's a form. If we were to click this, I mean, I promise I'm not making it up. Like, this is a form, right? And I'm pretty sure this is a form. It's a link, but anyways, there's more forms on the front end that you may imagine. Really, the job, what I've realized after 7 years, is that all I'm doing is making pretty forms and, you know, some other stuff, but it comes down to making really nice forms as a front-end developer. And SvelteKit makes that really easy. So in the chapter loading data, we saw how to get data from the server to the browser. Sometimes you will need to send data in the opposite direction. And that's where the form comes from. So let's build a to-do app we've already got memory database set up, server database.js, and our load function page server uses the cookies API, so we can have the power to do a to-do list. All right, so to-do routes, page.svelte, reload here. We need to create a form. So we got our UL to-dos, H1 to-dos, and we need to create a form. And in this form component, we're going to have a label, and this label is going to say add a to-do, and then it's going to have an input, and this input is going to be named description, too many spaces, and then autocomplete will be off, and then there has to be a type, right? Doesn't have a type on there. Text. We'll do text, and then we'll cap that off. If we put something into an input and hit enter, the browser makes a post request because of the method post attribute. We didn't put that on ours. You got to specify a method. You want it to be get, delete, post. 9 times out of 10, you want it to be a post, right? You're posting it to the server. But this results in an error if we hit submit. So let's do that. Oh yeah, 405, method not allowed. Someone tell me what 405 means, status code. Put in the chat. So we haven't created a server-side action to handle the post request. So that's important. So we have the load functions, and this may run a few minutes over, but this is going to bring it all together. It's really important. We have load functions, and then we have actions. So actions are what load passes the data in. Actions accept the data from our pages, from our components. And that's another export that we're going to do. This SvelteKit will pick up and know what to do with. So we'll do export const actions. It has to be named actions, and this is going to be an object. And we'll do the default one now, and this is going to accept a asynchronous function, and it eventually will return something. Now this takes the request event, so we'll have cookies available to us. We'll have the request available to us, and we'll need to turn that request into form data. So we'll say await request.form data, and then we'll console log that form data. So now let's refresh the page. Turn our const declarations. Oh, oopsie. All right, we're back. There we go. So now let's keep this server open. Now let's do a test here. Let's hit enter. And now we can see, even though it's light mode, we can see that, right? You can see the form data there, description equals test. And if I were to add another input in here named, oops, I don't know what I just did there. One copy. And then I'll call this one other, right? And then I need to shrink this, do test, hit enter. Broke something. This needs a label. But anyways, you would see that data there in the form data. Like that. To get the form data back. So it's a standard request object, so you can await form data, and you can name your form action. So we just named ours, default, but what'll happen is you'll have multiple actions, multiple forms on one page. So you can't just name it default. So then you'll name them. So we can call this one create, and then in page.svelte here in the form, we need to pass in the action name, and then we could put Oh, so this is the root, so it doesn't matter. You just need a question mark. For example, if this form action was located in another route, you would need to do path, right, to that, and then you would have a query parameter. But since this is the home, like this is they're on the same level directory, it's just the query param. So the query param is going to be called create. And now if we do this testing, exclamation mark, hit enter, not found. All right, create. I think you gotta do slash. I think I forgot the slash. Yeah, I forgot the slash. So it's a query param with the path name. So there we go. Slash create. There we go. Now that works. Exclamation mark. Testing. Oh no. It won't let me clear this terminal. If I can shrink it, I can't. So I'll raise this up. All right. So it's adding the to-dos. So yeah, that it skipped. So we're probably confused. The tutorial skipped, I believe, because we didn't do that part where we added the to-dos, data.to-dos. Yeah, it's not logging it out anymore. Yeah, so that's introduction to SvelteKit. We didn't get to dive as deep as I would have liked to on forms, but I will make sure that I update this recording to dive into forms. So we're a little bit of time over. Anyone that wants to stay and learn a little bit more about forms, I definitely have 30 more minutes to cover that, but I don't want to hold anyone scheduled to 7. Any questions? Sweet. If you have any questions, you can always ping me in Slack. So no pressure. If you go to bed and you wake up like 30 minutes, like, oh my God, I should have asked that question. Just ping me at 4. You won't wake me up.
Thanks, Sonny, for joining us tonight. And thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll share the recording.